Welcome to this YouTube version of this week's Highland League Weekly results panel from the Brechin Journal. This is taken from our main Highland League Weekly show, which is over on the Brechin Journal website and features highlights of two of the weekend's matches, Brechin City against Banks of Dee and Wick Academy against Brora Rangers, as well as a feature with recently returned to Scotland Highland League player Glenn Murison, who spent some time in Australia. If you'd like to watch that full version of the show, you can do over on the P&J website right now, but you need to be a subscriber to do so. The good news is you can subscribe via our Sport Pack for just £1 for your first 3 months at the moment, which is quite a good deal. But here we'll be discussing all 6 games that took place in the Highland League on Saturday. We're starting with that main game, Brechin City against Banks of Dee at Glebe Park. 2 of the 3 teams, Brora Rangers are the other one, in Highland League title contention this season. Brechin 2, Banks of Dee 2. I mean, a great game, what you'd expect from 2 great teams.
Aye, definitely, and I think over the piece a point was probably about right. I think in terms of clear-cut chances, Brechin had more, and it maybe doesn't quite come across in highlights, but in terms of territory, Banks of Dee had a lot of territory, and especially second half, once they got it back to 2-2, they had Brechin penned in for quite a period after that, but in fairness to the Hedgemen, their sort of backline dealt with that well, and you know, that sort of really gilt-edged chance that Banks of Dee were looking for to get themselves in front didn't quite fall for them, but I thought it was 2 well-matched sides, 2 good sides who both went for it, both tried to win, and a point I thought was about right. I mean, the conditions at times with the heavy rain at one point in the first half and the pitch was quite heavy. Come the end, conditions weren't easy, but both sides went for it, and the game was played at a high intensity, a good tempo, and it was a good 90 minutes of football. And as I say, I don't think either team deserved to lose anyway.
A little bit of a statement for me from Banks of Dee, because Brechin City are a team that have won the Breedon Highland League, and if teams, you know, find themselves behind there, then I mean, it can all go Pete Tong pretty quickly, but they showed the strength of character.
Very much so. I mean, we've said all season, Dee have to just try and stay in there, and because obviously you've got Brechin and Brora up there as well, and just try and stay in their coattails. But they've worked away, and just they're right there, and you can see the confidence is coming, probably with the belief now that we can go the distance here. And I wouldn't rule. I perhaps did rule them out a few weeks ago, but as time's going by and we're hitting the home straight, I'm looking at it as a 3-way race at this point. I think
it's definitely a 3-way race, and I think for Banks of Dee, ideally, they probably not maybe saying they needed to win's a bit much, but I think they probably felt winning was essential, but certainly, if you're not going to win, don't lose it. And it's like, we'll maybe talk about the top of the table once we've seen the second game in a bit more depth, but they are right in the mix as it stands. I think if you're going back over the 90 minutes, the biggest moment probably in the game is at 2-1 at the start of the second half when Killian Sheridan goes through on goal. Daniel Hoban makes a good save, and I do think if that you're on about, it could go wrong. If Brechin had scored then at 3-1 and Banks of Dee have to chase, you might have struggled to see a way back for them. But when they were only a goal behind, they were always in the game. And I think, and Patrick Craig touched on it a wee bit, it's like reflecting on it, that's probably the moment where Brechin could have sort of put their foot on the throat and gone on and potentially got themselves the 3 points. But again, Daniel Hoban made a good save, and Banks of Dee rallied well after that.
Came in and sending off. Any complaints?
You can't raise your hands. I think you're on a booking and he's pushed the guy away, and they're all at it, to be fair. There's lots of players pushing opponents away, but when one guy goes to the ground, it's then giving the referee a decision to make as to, is this just handbags and off you go, or is something a bit more going on here? And I don't think you can have any complaints.
Well, I think what you're saying is it's that thing Kane was on a booking, and I mean, he was sort of caught up in the centre of it because the sort of initial melee on the ground, he was in that, and there wasn't really anything he could do about players landing in the head on, but he was involved. And then, what, as you say, once you start, getting involved, you run the risk of getting a second yellow card, and I could understand that. I do think, given that he doesn't have replays and you're only seeing it live, I do think it was quite hard for referee Stuart Luke to get a handle properly on what was going on in there. And I think potentially where Banks and Dee were complaining is, if you watch the sort of initial part of it that sparks it, when Daniel Hoban, Kane Winton and Brad Mackay are on the ground, Brad Mackay's kicking out at Kane Winton and connecting sort of in the chest area here. And I do think you saw some of the Banks and Dee players speaking to the referee. I think Brad Mackay got booked. I think it's like one of them, if the referee, I don't know, maybe he did see it, but if the referee sees that clearly, I was sort of surprised. I mean, again, at the time, being at the game live, I couldn't see that, but you see it now on our footage. But it's one of them where Brad Mackay's potentially a wee bit fortunate to not receive his marching orders as well.
Okay, we've had loads of comments from Gary Manson, the Wick Academy manager this season, about being frustrated. I imagine there's been no more frustrating game for him than that one. How did Wick not score in that game?
Well, I said to Callum before we started filming, I can't remember a team creating so many chances against Brora in one game. It was Wick, the second half especially, down the slope, they had so many opportunities and just didn't take them. And they must be pig sick to come away with nothing from that.
Definitely. I think it's like Cammy Mackay, in fairness to him, made some decent saves, but as you're saying, there's quite a few in there where missing the target, when as a minimum you probably need to be making Cammy Mackay save them. I do think when they reflect the scores, you would take a bit of encouragement from,
The sheer number
you were creating chances. How many times have we seen it before where, a game like that where you maybe get totally shut out by Brora and don't create much, but like George Ewing, Gordon McNabb, Kyle Henderson and Ewan Kennedy, they all got into good positions, they all caused problems, which is the one positive Wick could take from it. But as Gary said himself, not being clinical enough in front of goals probably been the story of the season. But you've got to give credit to Brora, because I thought first half really, you're on about second half, but first half it was mainly Brora. It was mostly one-way traffic down the slope towards Wick's goal, and I thought Connor Bunce looked a real threat throughout. I mean, Matthew Wright scored 2 goals, his first goal since he rejoined Brora, and they're probably 2 sort of goals that Stephen Mackay signed him to score, that type of goals, if that makes sense. Poacher's goals inside the penalty box. I mean, the second one, he had that much time that he was able to get up and score. But the first one is one of them where he's in the right place at the right time to take it. And I know, from speaking to Stephen, since Jordan McRae's been injured, he's felt in some games that's the kind of goal that Brora haven't been scoring, where the ball maybe breaks in the box and somebody hasn't quite been there to capitalise. But as Matthew Wright showed on Saturday, if he's playing now, chances like that fall in the box, he's adept at being in the right place at the right time and finding the net. And I mean, over the piece as well for Brora, although they've done well to keep a clean sheet given the chances Wick had to get back to winning ways, keep a clean sheet and go back top of the league on goal difference. A thoroughly satisfactory afternoon for them. On the Wick front, I felt Ewan Kennedy looked pretty impressive. That's the first time I've really seen him play. Aye, he did well. I mean, Kenny's been a bit of a live wire in a few games really since he's come in on loan from Ross County, and he's somebody that I think, whether it's pushing on as a full-timer with Ross County or whether he ends up coming back to Wick on a more permanent basis, I think he's somebody that Gary Manson certainly feels has a bright future at the, in the game, and potentially with the scories going forward, because he's added an extra sort of something to their attack since he joined. Before we move on, can you confirm who it was that received a sore one from that free kick? It was Colin Williamson. Yeah. I mean, anybody that's ever played the game has, at any level, has experienced that, I'm sure. So I did pity Colin with that. I was going to say quickly as well before we move on, in terms of the table now, like the top 3, you've got Brora 52 points, goal difference of 54 from 22 games. You've got Brechin 52 points from 21 games, goal difference of 36. And Banks of Dee 49 points from 23 games and a goal difference of 39. So obviously they've played different games, but it's beautifully poised now in terms of the last couple of months of the season and that running to see, and even going back to what Patrick Craig said, it's now that case of these last 10, 11 games, who can put the best run together to go and get their hands on the title, basically. And I feel it's like we've had in recent seasons, it feels like it's going to be another one of them where every Saturday you're looking at the scores, how did they get on, and there could be a fair bit of chopping and changing yet, which is, it's what you, as much as if a team runs away with it, you applaud them and it's a great effort to run away with it, but as we've had in recent seasons, it's great when you get a title race that goes
final day drama.
Exactly. That's what we're hoping. It's great when you get a title race that goes all the way, and hopefully we're going to get that again. And I mean, you look, there's a couple of games worth flagging up even at this stage, like Brora against Brechin at Dudgeon Park on the 15th of March, and Brora against Banks of Dee on the 29th of March. I mean, they already look like mouth-watering fixtures because they should have a hugely significant bearing on who ends up winning the league. Yeah.
Let's move on to the 4 other Highland League games that were able to go ahead on Saturday. The first one, Formartine United 2, Fraserburgh 1. Call this a derby. Early goals at North Lodge Park from Stuart Smith and Scott Adams had Formartine 2-0 ahead. Aidan Sopel scored a late counter for the visitors. United now ahead of the Brock in the table. I mean, it's a great win for Formartine.
It was a good win for Formartine, and I think we saw them last week against Inverurie on here, and they had a lot of territory and had chances and they didn't take them. I think the pleasing thing for Stuart Anderson would be that they got that first goal and then they pushed on. They started well. It was a good finish I've seen footage, and it was a good finish for Stuart Smith to get them in front, and then Scott Adams added to it. And Stuart had a few changes to his team. Scott Adams, Tyler Makita, Michael Dangana all came in to start in the sort of forward areas, and all looked like they had quite an influence on Formartine's performance and getting themselves 2-0 in front. Could have maybe been more as well. Graham Roger had a good chance that he would normally score that he didn't take, but as you expect with Fraserburgh at 2-0, they're never out of the game, and I think for Mark Cowie the frustration would be that they couldn't get that first goal earlier, and then you maybe see what would happen. Like, Fraser Markey had a good chance in the first half, but second half, Scott Barber, when he came on, had a good chance before Sopel scored, and it's like, if Fraserburgh, and even at 2-1 in the dying embers, Connor Wood had a good chance as well, but it's that thing, if the Brock could have scored a wee bit earlier, you don't know what would have happened. But I mean, Formartine deserve credit for seeing it out as well, because when you play anyone, but especially Fraserburgh, they were throwing plenty at it in the closing stages, trying to get something out of the game, and that sort of this race, it seems like it's changing every week again. This sort of race, 4th, 5th, 6th, whatever. I mean, that was a good win for Formartine to get back above Fraserburgh, and with Clark not playing, it pulls them a wee bit closer to them as well in 5th. So, I mean, they'd be happy with that. For the Broch, I mean, that if you take out the Scottish Cup game at Ibrox, that's their first defeat since September. So, I mean, their good run had to come to an end at some point. And I think, other than the first 15-20 minutes, their performance after that was in keeping with what they would generally expect, so I don't think they'll be too negative about it. I mean,
it shows you how competitive the league is this season, doesn't it? That Fraserburgh have been on such a long unbeaten run, and here we are in early February and you've got Mark Cowie aiming for top 6.
Aye, well, it shows you, I mean, they didn't have the start they wanted either, but it just...
Too many draws.
Aye, that's the thing, draws is what's been their undoing ultimately in the league this season.
Okay, let's move on to a game that ended in, we're told, controversial fashion. Deveronvale 2, Turriff United 1. Mackenzie Taylor and Ben Hermiston exchanged goals, and then as the game entered the second minute of injury time, right at the end, referee Harry Bruce decided a challenge by Connor Grant on Jack Mitchell was worthy of a penalty. For Deveronvale, Harry Noble, the skipper, he stepped up and converted it. told it was highly contested.
Well, we should hopefully be able to show it. And Turriff, I think there's various points during the whole lead up which Turriff are unhappy about. I think the key one, and it's not, we don't have the perfect angle in the clip that we've got, but I think the key one is that the initial ball in behind, Jack Mitchell looks like he's offside. And I thought and the linesman was in the place to call it, and he hasn't called it, but I think Jack Mitchell looks like he's offside. Turriff also felt the challenge, if it was a foul, was outside the box. And it's hard, again, the clip we've got, it's hard to say conclusively one way or the other. I do think it starts outside the box, but there is potentially contact as they go into the box between Connor Grant and Jack Mitchell. However, the third part of it, if you see where the ball goes, I think Connor Grant certainly got a touch on the ball because the sort of direction of the ball deviates and it runs out towards the corner flag. So I can understand why Turriff are frustrated, because I think whether it's in or outside the box is harder to say, but I think certainly with the initial offside shout and then with the challenge, I mean, Connor Grant, there is contact with Jack Mitchell as well, but I think he certainly gets a touch on the ball. So I could see why, right at the end of the game, Turriff would be frustrated with that because, there's a couple of things in the build-up there where they feel that's going against us. The rub of the green in terms of decisions. But aside for that, I mean, first of all, penalty, in a sort of local derby game like that, penalty in the last minute. Give credit to Harry Noble for sticking it away, because it's never, he was taking it against Lee Herbert as well, and I believe both being for Buckie and things, they're maybe reasonably friendly, so wouldn't have been shocked if Lee maybe knew where Harry favours taking penalties and things like that, so he's converted it. And a good win for Vale, but having lost to Clark and then Banks Dee, just to get them going again and keep ticking away nicely. It was a welcome 3 points for Turriff. They would, as much as they were disappointed with the decision at the end, I think they would also admit that over the piece they didn't play as well as we've seen them in this recent 8-game unbeaten run. They maybe slipped below the sort of standards they've set recently, but at the same time I think they're obviously thinking we would have quite happily walked away with a point, and we haven't got that. But they can't really dwell on it because there's a big game in midweek for them Wednesday night, Turriff against Fraserburgh at the Hawks in the semi-final of the Morrison Motors Turriff Aberdeenshire Shield, and it's been a while since Turriff have been in a cup final, so that's a huge game for them to look forward to, and one that I'm sure they'll try and bounce back quickly for Saturday and try and get themselves into a final. Okay.
Inverurie Locos won 3-1 away at Lossiemouth on Saturday. Locos 4th in the table. Lossie took the lead through Lewis McAndrew with a penalty, but Locos were back on level terms 12 minutes later. Callum Dingwall free kick broke to Jay Halliday and he scored. Locos went ahead on the hour mark following another set piece. Paul Cooch's corner, finished off by Lloyd Robertson, then Cole Anderson finished off the display for Locos with another goal. Dean Donaldson said it was one of the best performances from his side since he's taken the job at Locos.
He seemed very impressed with the football they were playing and how they went about it, and coming from behind as well is always good if you're able to do that. And three wins on the spin now, and 3 tricky games for Martin at home, and then they've sandwiched by away games at Forres and Lossie, which are never easy. And they've come through that well, and now sitting above, with Clark not playing, they're now above them in 4th, and I think if they could finish 4th, I've said it before, but it would be a real sign of progress for Inverurie from where they've been in recent seasons if they could get into that top 4. And you can't really do anything but praise them at the minute for how they're going. I think from a Lossie perspective, having got themselves in front, and often once they get in front, particularly at Grant Park, they're good at sort of holding on to something and keeping themselves in the game. They'll be disappointed with the first and second goals. It's just not reacting to the second balls at set pieces. Like they've sort of defended the initial situation, but then the second phase they don't get there. That because as much as Locos from what we hear, played some good stuff. It's like if they'd, if you're Lossie, if they've a neat move and they've cut you open, you can sort of hold your hands up, but when it's coming for set pieces, you'd be disappointed with that. The one last thing I'd say about this game is I would, not often I do this, but I'll praise the referee, Robert McKinnon, because the penalty he gave, which we should be able to show you on screen, free kick in, and it's a race between James Leslie and the goalkeeper Zach Ellis to get there. James Leslie gets there first and wins a header, and then Zach Ellis couldn't do anything to avoid colliding with him, and it's a collision. And it's
normally the goalkeeper gets the benefit.
It's one of them where
yeah.
if an attacker challenges a goalkeeper and there's any contact, it's a free kick. But I've seen it plenty of times where you get an incident like Saturday where the goalkeeper seems to get away with making contact. But so I thought that was a right decision for Robert McKinnon and good refereeing. But whether all of his colleagues follow suit sometimes when you see players getting wiped out by goalies, I don't know. But I thought he got as much. I can be some folk moaning about it, but I thought he got that one right, and it was a good decision worth highlighting.
Bad weekend for Harry Bruce in Highland League Weekly's overall referee rankings. Anyway,
he'll be disappointed because he does watch.
Let's move on to the final game that took place at the weekend. 3 games were postponed due to wintry weather, but it was Buckie Thistle 5, Rothes 1. The headline from this being that Finn Allen scored in his debut on loan from Elgin City for Buckie. Rothes had opened the scoring, through Andrew Skinner's free kick, and then goals from Lyle Keir, Aaron Nicholson, Andrew McCaskill and Josh Peters for Buckie as well. Comprehensive. Have we seen this free kick?
Haven't, no. Hopefully by the time this goes out we might have seen it, but as we sit here now I haven't. But no, it's interesting because Andrew Skinner isn't somebody I would have necessarily put top of the list in terms of free kick takers, but he's clearly come up with a beauty on Saturday. I think the frustration for Rothes with that is they'd soaked up pressure, got themselves in, but then they found themselves behind again. I mean, equalised and good impact for him on his debut for Buckie. But then Rothes, they conceded the second goal a couple of minutes before half time, the third 5 minutes after half time, and then once it went 3-1, it was game over basically, and Buckie have kicked on again. And I just think for Rothes at the moment, they're just conceding too many goals. They're not giving themselves a chance in games, and even games, and we've seen it in previous matches, even games where they've played well in spells, they've ended up maybe conceding 4 or 5 goals, and it's like you don't give yourself a chance of getting anything out of the game if that keeps happening. But on the other side, I would give Buckie credit. I mean, they've had a tough run of it, three straight defeats, but they bounced back well, and be pleased. I mean, obviously Finn Allen is a debutant scoring, but even beyond that, they'll be pleased to have the likes of Aaron Nicholson and Josh Peters scoring. Because I mean, Aaron Nicholson's sort of done well since he come in, and Josh Peters, it's probably fair to say injuries blighted his season a wee bit with various niggles and different things. So for him to get back on the score sheet will be pleasing as well.
Okay, let's have a look then at, we've discussed them a little bit already in fairness, but let's have a look at the latest Reading Highland League standings following the weekend's 6 matches. Okay, that's all of Saturday's Breedon Highland League matches discussed. Then, just a reminder, the discussion you've just watched was taken from our main Press and Journal Highland League Weekly show, which is over on our website and contains highlights of Brechin City against Banks of Dee from the weekend, as well as Wick Academy against Brora Rangers, and a feature on Formartine United's recent signing Glenn Murison following his return from Australia. You need to be a subscriber if you want to watch that full version, but the good news is that you can get access via the Sports Pack to the Press and Journal website for just £1 for your first 3 months at the moment, and that means in the weeks ahead, right till the end of the season potentially, yeah, that almost works out, you can watch our full episodes of Highland League Weekly every Monday. If you want to keep watching just these results panels, the good news is we'll be back next week with another one on YouTube. In the meantime, you can keep up to date with all our latest Highland League and Highland League Weekly content from the P&J via 2 avenues. You can sign up to our various social media channels. You can also sign up to our Highland League newsletter. There's a link to do that below this video. But yes, until we see you next week, please enjoy the football, whichever games you're watching.